now uncovering the stories that matter inside Out West on BBC One with Alistair McKee.
Hello from Hinckley in Somerset, where we're investigating just how prepared we are for a nuclear accident. Tonight, with 2 new power stations earmarked for the west of England, what do our evacuation plans look like?
If there is a nuclear accident, then you've really got to move people out of the way, sometimes forever.
We have no specific plans for the nuclear threats because of the distances involved.
I'm Alistair McKee, and this is Inside Out West. With plans now well underway for the next generation of nuclear energy, the west of England finds itself in a very important position. 2 new power stations are planned, and the ageing Hinkley B reactor behind me has had its life extended by another 7 years. But in the event of an accident, what evacuation plans exist, particularly for the hugely populated Bristol area? They said it would never happen, but in March last year, it did. A huge earthquake and tsunami hit Japan, causing the meltdown of the Fukushima nuclear power plant.
Do not drink the water. Do not eat the food.
Protesters in the west of England have long campaigned against plans for new nuclear power stations at both Oldbury and Hinckley.
Stand by your own. Stand by your own.
Following the Fukushima meltdown, towns around the nuclear plant are still affected by high levels of radiation. Here, EDF, who runs Hinckley, says there is no credible scenario for an accident affecting Bristol. But campaigners are asking Bristol City Council if its residents would be evacuated if a nuclear accident happened here.
For a start, it's like nobody seemed to know, and eventually we managed to get a sort of letter stating there wasn't a specific plan.
So, Bristol City Council does not have an evacuation plan. What should Bristolians do in the event of a nuclear accident? Ros Bohill and Joe Baker are worried the city isn't prepared for exposure to radiation.
We had an action at Hinckley and we let off a bunch of helium balloons, and the first of those on this still day was actually seen to arrive in Bristol an hour later. If that had been a radiation plume, for instance, it would take no more than an hour, and yet Bristol is not considered to be in any kind of real danger from that.
And it then went on past just north of Swindon all the way to Milton Keynes, and it's not been talked about by the government.
Last year, the EU looked at UK nuclear facilities and concluded they were robust. Currently, evacuation plans cover people living up to 5 kilometres away from Hinckley.
But after seeing Ros and Joe's letter from Bristol City Council, I want to find out whose responsibility it is to look after the city in the event of a nuclear accident. Do we even need an evacuation plan?
To date, there's never been an off-site accident at Hinckley. EDF says that the safety of the plant, which is regulated by an independent body, is of paramount importance. But some experts think we should still be prepared.
It's very odd that there are no evacuation plans, because if there is a nuclear accident, as we've seen in Fukushima and Chernobyl and elsewhere, then you've really got to move people out of the way, sometimes forever.
Tom Burke is an environmentalist. He was formerly executive director of Friends of the Earth and has worked as a government advisor.
If they explain to people what they would have to do in evacuation and how it would have to go about, I think they think that, well, I think there's a great feeling it would turn people off nuclear power. So there's a huge reluctance in the industry to get into any kind of discussion on this issue, and there always has been.
There's been public anger towards the Japanese government amidst allegations that it didn't evacuate people quickly enough. The United States recommended that all residents within 80 kilometres of the power plant be moved. But after the meltdown, Japan only imposed a 20-kilometre exclusion zone. At the nearby village of Itate, residents were only evacuated after 2 months of exposure. Following the completion of a filmmaking MA at Bristol University, Ian Thomas Ash moved to Japan. Since the nuclear meltdown, he's been investigating the impact on the people living near Fukushima. I caught up with Ian via a webcam. From what you've heard, how far do you think the radiation has spread?
Because of the wind direction, there were some areas that were closer to the plant which actually had lower radiation levels than places that were further away. And so there are areas that are 60 kilometers from the nuclear power plant that have extremely high radioactive hotspots. It became very clear very quickly that there wasn't a plan, and that when it was clear that some people had to evacuate, it wasn't clear where they should go. And there weren't even evacuation routes.
In parts of Japan, it sounds as if the evacuation was really chaotic. Would it go any smoother in Bristol? In Bristol City Council's letter to Ros and Joe, it says there's a command and coordination structure in place with Avon and Somerset Police. So the campaigners have decided to contact them instead.
They can't tell us, basically. Please be assured that the police work alongside our emergency service colleagues. Blah, blah, blah. And everything's tested on a regular basis to ensure that all agencies, both nationally and within the force, are able to respond in an integrated manner. You know, I mean, again, it's nothing very much.
So, Bristol City Council suggested the campaigners speak to the police for answers, but they claim not to have any details about a specific evacuation plan. Neither Bristol City Council nor Avon and Somerset Police could answer the campaigners' questions. And although a recent government report found that there were no fundamental weaknesses in any UK nuclear facilities, it seems that nobody is responsible for Bristol's welfare in the event of a nuclear accident.
Now, I've checked Avon and Somerset Police's risk assessment for an industrial nuclear accident, and it says Bristol City Council should manage that risk. We also received an email from the police confirming that the local authority is the lead agency for coordinating any evacuation.
So we thought we should ask the man who replied to Ros and Joe's initial request, Simon Creed from Bristol City Council.
The risk from a nuclear static accident is not one considered a foreseeable, reasonable risk at this stage. Now that's because the nuclear power station's proximity to Bristol, the Hinkley Point is beyond 30 miles, but the Oberon 7 and Berkeley ones are a lot closer. So we have no plans at this stage, or specific plans for the nuclear threat, because of the distances involved.
So, at the moment, Bristol isn't legally required to have an evacuation plan. If an accident at Hinkley occurs, we're told by the council to stay indoors and tune into local radio. But a year after Fukushima, a new paper was published in the UK suggesting that exclusion zones around our nuclear stations could be increased to 30 kilometres.
If this was the case, then we would not be affected by Hinkley Point, but we may be affected by projected site at Oberon 7, which has not gone through any processes at this stage. Then we would have to review our thinking and look at our planning.
Since we spoke to the council, it's been confirmed that Japanese company Hitachi plans to rebuild the Oldbury nuclear station to 4 times its current size. It's likely that Bristol will need an evacuation plan if this goes ahead. We're assured by the industry and the government that nuclear power is safe. But since the Fukushima meltdown, Japan's government has announced it will abandon its programme. Germany and Switzerland are doing the same. The UK is continuing with nuclear regeneration, but some experts are unsure whether new guidelines are enough to prepare Bristol for an accident, whatever the chances of it happening.
At one point in the Fukushima accident, the government of Japan was within a very short time of ordering the evacuation of Greater Tokyo. That's 30 million people a lot further away from Fukushima than the people of Bristol are from Hinckley. So what would have happened if they'd had to do that would have been complete chaos. You can't have an evacuation plan that you can expect to work unless people know what they're supposed to do.